What the? Don't do it. Don't do what? Who are you? What are you doing here? I am your future self, and I'm telling you, don't write a theory about Back to the Future. No. Come on, man. Everybody does this shitty sketch where a future version of ourselves come to the past to tell us not to do something, but you know what? Everybody does it anyway. But what did you expect? I made a mistake, and now that I can travel back in time, I am correcting it. The point is, you will not talk about Back to the Future on this channel. This is a bad idea. Okay, but then what if I was to explain how the timeline actually works in Back to the Future? I mean, it could work, but you have to be very careful and precise about it. Maybe you could start the video with a sketch of you talking to your future self about it, you know, something like that. Won't people see it's just me from the present? Nah, just change shirt and, you know, untie your hair and nobody will see the difference. Seriously? Are people really that dumb in the future? It's not that they're dumb, but the suspension of disbelief has been stretched very thin since Disney dominated the entire world and enslaved the human race. I'm actually on a mission to fix that later today. I'm sorry, what? You serious? You're just gonna disappear after dropping a bomb like that? Well, if you really want to know, in 2035, all the children got the right to vote and they all voted for Mickey Mouse. He basically dominated the entire universe and the entire pop culture, and since then every single movie is the same, so no one cares what they're seeing. The point is, don't talk about Back to the Future unless you're ready to be very precise about it, and don't with the mouse, because the mouse will you back. On that note, I have to go, I'm late for something. What do you mean you're late? You can time travel! Guess I'm gonna write a guide on how to travel through time then. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and welcome to Let's Talk Theory, the show where we analyze some idea and hypothesis around our favorite subjects. I'm your host, Zelrix, and today I'm gonna take you back to 1885, 1955, 1985, and 2015, because we're talking about my favorite movie of all time, Back to the Future, and analyzing how the time travel actually works in this universe. Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time, but it talks about time travel. And as we all know, time travel is the number one reason why a scenario can suck. Actually destroying an entire plot with a time paradox is something that is really easy to do. Take some note, DC Comics. Seriously, you can do a pretty fun drinking game with that. Take a shot whenever a DC Comics character changes the timeline and mess things up, and take 2 shots if it is a speedster. But anyway, even for a time travel movie, the suspension of disbelief is stretched incredibly thin in Back to the Future. So, this is why, while rewatching the movies, I've decided that I'm gonna write a guide on how time travel actually works. What are the rules that surrounds it? Because let's face it, the only real rule we're given in Back to the Future about time travel is don't change anything in the past so you won't mess up the timeline. Which is A, something pretty elementary, and B, something that no character ever respected in the history of ever. Even though the movies are almost 35 back now and we have long passed the due date for the invention of the overboard, beware of spoilers. And remember that I'm gonna try to be objective, but these are my favorite movies. This is gonna be really hard. And finally, since we're dealing with time travel, prepare yourself for a pretty big headache. So now that this is out of the way, let's talk theory. Alright, first thing we need to do is to understand what kind of universe we are dealing with. Fortunately, we see throughout the movies and the titled comics that the Back to the Future universe answers to the multiversal rule of the Schrödinger cat. In 1935, Schrödinger put a cat in a box with a bottle of poison, having the assumption that if the bottle of poison was to break, the cat would die. Before being condemned for animal cruelty, obviously, Schrödinger declared that he had to open the box to be sure the cat was dead. I don't know if the cat actually died, never asked myself this question. So here we have 2 choices, whether the cat survives or he dies. But according to this theory, whenever there is a choice like that, the universe split in half. and each new universe has made his own choice. In a universe, the cat has survived, and in another universe, the cat has died. And technically, before you open the box, the cat is considered to be both dead and alive at the same time. This is what we call a multiverse, multiple universe that regroup in an infinite number of possibilities. Back to the Future actually follow these rules. There is a universe where Biff Tannen is the richest man on Earth, another one where he is just a bully, and a final one where he works for Marty's dad. That plus the Back to the Future comics actually confirm that there are indeed multiple timelines. So we're definitely dealing with the multiverse, and this is gonna be our first rule. The timeline can split in this multiverse. So now back to the end of the first Back to the Future movie, where Marty's father became, because of Marty time traveling, a successful published writer instead of a moderately paid worker. This is perhaps an instance where Marty did create a new timeline, thus a new universe. But Marty remembers the old universe. He arrives, he wonders why his brother wears a suit, and his brother confirms that he wears a suit every day at work, and Marty doesn't even know that he has a 4x4 waiting for him in the garage. And this is gonna help us deduce our second rule. The entire plot of the first movie relies on the fact that if George and Lorraine don't kiss, Marty will cease to exist. But the thing is, if Marty ceases to exist, then he can never travel to the past and he can never stop his parents from meeting. Thus, he can be born. The timeline should have resetted itself by now. Or option 2, it would have actually destroyed this universe due to the time paradox that was unsolvable. So right there, we can observe our second rule. Time works in a ripple effect. The picture of Marty's family doesn't disappear right away. His brothers start disappearing, then his sister, then him. Time actually needs to update like a computer to the new sequence of events. Fortunately, at the end of the movie, George and Lorraine actually kiss, and not to be a bummer, but their happily ever after brings up a new problem. So you're gonna tell me that even if they grew up to be very different person than they were, they had the same 3 kids on the same date in the same order, and they did name them the same name? I don't know what the odds are for that to happen, but they're clearly pretty low. Unless, once again, there is a ruling here, something very secret. If you think about it, the fact that they have the exact 3 kids at the same moment that they had in the previous timeline, it means that the new timeline is trying to be as faithful as possible to the old timeline. But we're gonna get back on that later. As mentioned earlier, Marty has the memory of the old timeline, and in Back to the Future 2, we can see that Doc does have the memory of the old 1985, not the one ruled by Biff, but the one where everything was good. This is gonna be another rule for us, another way to deduce how the time works. People involved in a change in the timeline actually remembers the old timeline, their prime timeline. Because let's face it, at the end of Back to the Future, Marty's body was basically hijacked by the soul of an old Marty that remembered a timeline that doesn't even exist anymore. These movies are pretty dark when you put them that way. Then perhaps our most important rule, and somehow no one talks about it, the law of paradoxes. According to Doc, if the old Jennifer and the young Jennifer were to see each other in the distant future of the year 2015, oops, they would destroy the universe because of a time paradox. But when they see each other, nothing of that happened, they just pass out and the universe is fine. I think there is another rule hidden in there, a rule that says that the timeline will do whatever it can to prevent paradoxes from happening. I mean, what were the odds that both Jennifer were to pass out at the same time? Assuming that if one of them didn't pass out, the universe might have been destroyed, this is a pretty convenient point if you ask me. At the end of Back to the Future Part 2, Marty actually goes to see the 1955's Doc after the departure of 1985's Doc to 1885. But Marty from the second movie actually comes to see Doc right after Marty from the first movie left to go back to the future. And when this Marty tries to get to the mall before Doc gets killed, well, he arrives too late and his old self has already gone to 1955. Once again, the two Marty didn't meet. I have a headache, goddammit! Then there's that moment when the man that was delivering Marty's mail came and gave him the letter from Doc. He arrives at a moment when Marty is miraculously still there, but Doc has already disappeared. Once again, this is a question of seconds. I mean, of course, he had instruction to arrive at this precise time, but there was no traffic to slow him down. He actually went even though there is a big storm and they're in the middle of nowhere, and he lets Marty leave without any explanation on why somebody more than half a century earlier wrote a note to a 17 years old. And all these things need to work like a well-oiled machine to prevent paradoxes from happening. And this is gonna be another rule. Time itself is trying to avoid paradoxes. It is the timeline that ensures that Jennifer passed out and that the multiple versions of Marty never met themselves. So here's my 101 class on how to actually understand time travel. Rule number 1 is actually a multiverse. Whenever there is a multiple choice, two universes are created, and in each of those universes a different choice has been made. Rule number 2, when a change occurs in the timeline needs to adapt, it needs to update. It's like a ripple effect that will take a few days to adjust to the new sequence of events that now compose reality. Rule number 3, people responsible for a change in the timeline and thus a change of universe will live in the universe with the new sequence of events but will remember the old timeline. Rule number 4, Biff is Donald Trump. Rule number 4, the timeline actually displays some kind of failsafe against time paradox. It can influence the sequence of events so that the time paradox will not occur. But this failsafe is not even near perfect. Which finally brings us to our final rule, our most important one, and one that englobes all the other rules. We're gonna call it rule number 0. This big rule is, in the Back to the Future universe, time is actually a sentient being. Like you and I, it has the ability to feel and to take decisions and action. When you think about it, if the timeline was as objective as it seems to be, it would have actually killed Marty before he can separate his parents and create a pretty big time paradox. And also, look at how the first movie actually ended. Everybody got what they deserve. Nice people got a happy ending, and jerks like Biff are now working for the people they bullied in high school. The timeline feels emotion. It feels who deserves what in the new continuity. It might seem far-fetched, but put yourself in this situation. You are an almighty god, extra-dimensional being that has the power to influence time itself. And one day, there is a guy who has a pretty weird relationship with a 17 years old, by the way, who decided to start you up from the inside. Not gonna be very fun to live, I'm gonna tell you that right now. Of course you're gonna react, you have to react, especially knowing that the fabric of the universe itself is at stake. So there you go guys, you have my personal belief on the ruling of time travel in the Back to the Future universe. Hope you liked it. If you did, be sure to put your own set of rules in the comment section down below. Then subscribe and activate the bell to be notified when a new video comes up. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram to support my artwork, share this video with all your friends, and as always, thanks for watching.